Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, everybody. My name is Bill Woodcock. You are watching or listening to But Before We Go, the podcast that is about Gen X by Gen X for everybody. And today's episode topic, ladies and gentlemen, nuclear war. Oh, yes. So, you know, the boomers might have had the duck and cover drills. Those duck and cover drills, for those of you out there in viewer and listener land who don't know, duck and cover drills were things that went on, at least in North America, during the 50s and 60s, and some have told me even into the 70s. And in these drills, in order to evade a nuclear blast, in the case of a thermonuclear conflict involving any of the world's nuclear nations, chiefly the US or the Soviet Union, but in the case of a mushroom cloud appearing on the horizon or simply down the street, you were advised to, as a school child, to attempt to survive the blast by ducking yourself and covering yourself up by getting under your desk. Very ridiculous. Considering, of course, the nuclear flash would instantly blind you were you fool enough to look at it, that there would be a concussive blast that would probably destroy the school building. And then also there would be a nuclear firestorm that would be extraordinarily hot, and that would burn you, your classmates, your teachers, even the pet goldfish in the classroom to a crisp. So this was dumb. This was very, very dumb. But this was the you boomers out there had to deal with. And I understand some of my Gen X peeps had to deal with that too. But the fact that you thought that you could duck and cover just kind of shows how ridiculous it was in terms of being aware of what nuclear war was. Y'all had no clue in Boomerland what a nuclear war could do. I mean, you thought you could duck and cover and get away from it. You thought you could go into fallout shelters and eat biscuits and drink, distilled water for months. And then you would be able to come out and everybody would be cool. It'd be like, yeah, no big whoops. Y'all thought it was like real life Fallout, except this was 70 years before the game Fallout. So you all had no idea, but you all thought it worked like Fallout. You did. Admit it. You did. It's not like Fallout. It is much worse than Fallout. It is bad. Nuclear war is bad. Nuclear war is literally scorching the earth. Nuclear war is literally ending all life on this planet, animal or vegetable. And if there are any living rocks out there, mineral as well. But we Gen Xers, oh yes, we knew what nuclear war was all about. And how could this be? Because we had it drilled into our brains. So, for one, a lot of us, our schools, mine included, had fallout shelters in the basement. So, in our case, our fallout shelter was our cafeteria. So, kind of makes sense. If you want to survive a nuclear war, go to the cafeteria, go to where there's food. That was in my elementary school. In the middle school, the fallout shelter was the art room. That I understood a little bit less. I mean, what about nuclear war would make us want to do art? Why would we want to take out the paper mache, take out the paints, take out the magic markers, take out the chalk, and draw, or sculpt, or do anything creative to, I don't know what, reinforce our faith in humanity, show the inner beauty that exists in even the worst of times? I don't understand that. I don't understand why we were in the art room as the fallout shelter in middle school. Because if the shit would have hit the fan, we would have art. What would art have mattered? But we would have went out, but we would have went out cultured. No, it was in my high school years that we got exposure as to what nuclear war was. Now, I'm sure that for those of you who might be listening out there or watching who are not in the United States or did not grow up in the United States, you may have heard of these next few movies. And heck, you guys probably did these sorts of things too, to be aware in case of a nuclear war. And look, the chance was not zero that there was ever going to be a nuclear war. I mean, we still live with that risk today, except now I think we just have all kind of relegated ourselves to knowing that when the missiles fly, we're over. We have about 5 minutes before they start going off. And once they start, they're not going to stop until there's the entire world is destroyed. But yet, war games is right. Global thermonuclear war could happen. And, it's not like there aren't a couple of little theater wars, Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Iraq, Iran and Israel, India and Pakistan that could not go hot and could not drag the United States, Russia, or China into it. No, there's no risk of nuclear war now. But I think we're just all kind of realize that when the nukes fly, we're vapor. In the 80s, we didn't think that. We thought it could still be survivable because duck and cover exercises and our parents and fallout shelters in our schools being marked, cafeteria, art room. Um, but then there were these movies. So there were these movies. In early 1983, as the Sunday night NBC movie, they showed a movie called Special Report. And the special report, it was done like a TV news special report. And there were terrorists who had taken over a building in Charleston, South Carolina, and they were threatening to blow up Charleston, South Carolina. Not just the building, because these terrorists had a nuclear bomb. I will not go through the entire plot. You can look it up if you would like. It's on Wikipedia. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. But, there were correspondence at the scene, cut-ins to the White House about whether or not there really was a nuclear bomb, cut-offs to the Pentagon, it was done first class. And eventually, negotiations broke down. One of the terrorists lost their shit and set off the nuke and destroyed the city of Charleston, South Carolina. Well, as we all know, no nuke went off in 1983 in Charleston. Charleston is still very much there. It is still very much a quite pleasant place to visit or to live, I understand. But a lot of people called in and thought the special report was real. So, bye bye, Charleston. Hello, fear level about what will really happen in a nuclear holocaust. But that was just one city that got blowed up. Then there was the day after, which was an ABC television movie. And in that, the city of Lawrence, Kansas was destroyed as part of a nuclear exchange. And you got to see the nukes go off. You got to see, nukes from ICBM silos located all willy-nilly all through the American Midwest, which is apparently where they are. You know, you had the iconic picture of a boy standing in a cornfield as ICBMs arc out over him, harbinging the end of all civilization. But yet, even then, They did show the devastation, they did show the destruction, and they showed that, you know, pretty much everything is going to be done. I mean, but you could still live it. You could still live after it, but you probably might not want to live there. Probably might not want to be part of that. Then the next year, there was a movie called Threads because the BBC and the Australians are not going to be left out. And it talked about and it showed the effects of a nuclear attack on Sheffield in the UK. It was kind of a cross of Special Report and Day After in terms of plot, but it was also its own thing. So it actually went into a little bit about how life was like and how life might be like and how desperate it would be. Very well done movie. I think, unlike Day After still had a lot of people thinking that was really happening. I think Threads had some, but it was easier to understand that it was not really happening in real time. Sheffield was still there. But again, it did fool some people. So there were other shows too. I mean, I remember some other show on, again, NBC, because NBC wanted to scare the hell out of us, that talked about, some base in Alaska being taken over by the Russians and by U.S. forces, threatening the Russians to get out of, the base. And then eventually we just destroyed the base using a nuke, which then the Russians fired back. It was basically the book and movie failsafe, except it was in Russia, except it was Alaska with the Russians. Um, but the fact of the matter is that these folks are the first times that what a nuclear war could actually mean and what would result as the result of a nuclear conflict. That's the first time those were brought home on television. That's the first time we've seen it. We have truly never seen television coverage of the devastation of a nuclear bomb. I mean, yes, there were films from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but that's not a correspondent there wearing a radiation suit talking with survivors. That's not that. We've never seen it. And these movies helped show it to us. These movies showed us what Armageddon would look like. Oh, and then, of course, on the heels of all of these, there was Terminator 2 with Skynet and all human life on Earth being nuked and the rest of it. So 83, 84, 85 was a real bad time to feel like a human being. And as we were, I mean, I was 14, 16 years old, 18 years old during that time. And for people growing up behind me who were all part of Gen X, because even the 15-year-olds in 1985 were born in 1970, and if you were a baby and if you were old enough to watch the movie, say you were 10, you were raised in 75, you're prime Gen X. You know, we got to understand a little bit of what was at risk and how has that changed Gen X? How did that define Gen X? I think it made us a little bit more of a live for today generation, a little bit of do what we can while we're here because the next day is not guaranteed type of generation. You know, it made us certainly, there's certainly me, more suspicious of authority and more grateful for what's precious and what's important. And in my 20s and 30s, it made me want to go get a lot more of what was precious and important to me. Probably helped drive my ambition because I had no idea that I was ever going to live to 50, 60, 70, 80. I thought the nukes were coming. I thought the Russians were going to blow us up. And, I still think that might happen. It's not like it was back when I was in high school, back when I was in college. And I don't think I ever stopped fearing nuclear war until well into the 90s, just in time to feel safe in time for 9/11. So I think maybe that's why, right today, the public is not as scared of the chance of instant evaporation as maybe we used to. We've been deadened to it. We've seen horrific, unthinkable acts of violence unfold in front of our TV screens. We have seen the desperation and the evil that people will do. We believe more so than we did 15 years ago, 40, certainly 40 years ago, that people can do the horrific thing of setting off a nuclear warhead. People can do that. And I think that awareness at the same time makes us more deadened to the concept of a nuclear war, but also makes us more sensitive to it and makes us more determined to make sure that never happens. That's all I have for today's episode. Next episode, find out why I time each and every episode of this podcast at 18 minutes and 30 seconds. Because we are going to talk about the end of the presidency of President Richard Milhous Nixon, who was the first and so far only United States president to resign as a result of his involvement in the cover-up regarding the Watergate scandal. Next episode will be about Watergate. Until then, my name is Bill Woodcock. You've been watching or listening to But Before You Go. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.